So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we got our participants have stayed there fairly steady at 32, 34 people. I apologize. I'm on a desktop today. I had a little bit of technical difficulties on the laptop. But we do have a little presentation here on planting basics as well as a little seed starting video here. As far as what we want to touch base on here is getting those seeds off to a good start this year. A lot of people have issues when it comes to seed starting. It's something we all like to do. We have a lot of fun with it, but it also gives us a lot of headaches and frustration as we go along. Seems to. And so a lot of these things are things that I've learned from my own troubleshooting, my own mistakes, and so we'll go through a few of those. Be sure to jump in, chime in, ask questions as we go, and hopefully we can all learn a little bit here this afternoon. So, from a gardening perspective, I really just hope that we iterate that these plants want to survive, they want to live, and we just got to give them three basic requirements, and that's light, nutrients, and water. And as long as we fulfill those needs of that plant in what they want, we can have a really successful growing season. One thing I always tell my master gardeners, my classes, my students is that plants really do talk to us. We just got to know how to listen and respond to what their needs are. So when it comes to growing strong plants, really we gotta start off with a good seed source. You get what you pay for, so to speak. So we got to have the right kind of light. So not all light is equal. You can't, for the most part, get any better than true sunlight, and obviously that can come in different forms or different strengths depending on where we have these plants placed at. But when we're trying to start these plants out underneath light, we got to make sure that they get the proper amount of energy that they need. That's where all that plant production is going to come from. It's from the energy they sustain within that light spectrum. So pampered plants don't make productive plants. So we don't need to baby these things as we go. We want to use the proper spacing on these. We don't want to crowd them out. We don't want too little plants either as far as for covering up that ground cover, especially when we're talking outside production and weed development. So, and the one thing we need to know is that like I said earlier, those plants will tell us what we need or what they need. We just got to know to listen. From a seed source perspective, you do get what you pay for. Don't be afraid to try new varieties out there. Obviously, from the Grow This program, we're sending you those varieties this year, but on a basic yearly deal when you're out there purchasing plants. Try something new. Don't be afraid to throw a new tomato variety in there, a new pepper variety. Try something different. Sometimes we get stuck on the same old because we're afraid to change. But there's some really great varieties out there that we can get a hold of, and make your order early. This is one that I often procrastinate on. I still have not made my seed order, but I do order my plants or my seeds online, and the earlier you get that seed order in, the better chances are you're going to get what you want. All that seed's going to be the um, same quality from those seed companies like Harris or Burpee but from a general standpoint, those often the good varieties go quickly. So get in there and do it early. Getting these plants off to the right start. A lot of people like to when you're mixing that soil at home or when you're starting those seeds. I've seen people do a lot of different things. There's a lot of different options out there. We have the soil cubes that we just need to add water to. We've got potting mixes at Lowe's and farm supply stores. I really like to start off with a Pro Mix. Uh, that some of the garden supply companies will carry that here, at least in my general area. You can always go to the nurseries and pick up those cubes. Those are normally 30, 40 pound cube that you do have to bust open and mix up. When you do get that soil, mix it prior to putting it in your soil tray. So let's get that moisture in there. If you pack those trays with soil starter right out of the bag, you're never going to get that soil moisture where it needs to be for that root germinate or for that seed germination and for that proper root development. So mix those up in a bucket prior to, or I have a great big tub that I mix all of my soil prior to filling my trays. It makes filling trays really easy. And honestly, it's a little less mess when you're doing it that way. But first thing is getting that good soil mix. Some of the soil starter mixes that you'll find at some of the garden supply stores, there's a lot of mulch in there, a lot of big pieces. You really want something that's been sifted, that doesn't have all of those barriers that those seedlings are going to have to work through to get a good start. So if you bust one of those bags open and it's full of big pieces of mulch that haven't broke down, put that one off to the side and let's use that later on for some of our container gardening. That's not material we want to start seeds in. So when it comes to light options, there are a lot of different sources. Obviously, sunlight, natural sunlight is what is going to be best for our plants. That's going to be in the spectrum that they want. They make a lot of different grow lights out there. We have when you look on there, that you'll find a lot of them from the grow light perspective are what they call T5 bulb. You can use the T8s. Those things, that's actually what I grow under. They do work good. They don't actually have the absolute best spectrum of light for those plants, but they do put that that light out that those plants will grow off of. I start all my plants in the basement on one of those, and it has worked fairly well for me. When you're looking at from a vegetative perspective, it's also there's different light spectrums that you need for vegetation versus flowering and production. If you do plants inside year round, the LED lights provide a better spectrum for a lot of these plants. But you need a lot more of them and make sure that you can kind of cover that plant's needs and make sure that we have enough light source for however many plants we are growing. If you're growing a large number of flats, those LED lights can get fairly expensive in order to actually cover the full spectrum of area that you need when you're growing 3 or 4 flats of plants at a time. If you're small production, then those LED lights work really good. The one thing that we got to remember when we are growing those plants is all the energy that is inside that seedling is going to need to come, or all the energy that plant needs is going to have to come from that light source. So when you have those lights really far away from those seedlings, they're going to try to stretch and grow towards that. So when I start my plants off, I normally run about anywhere from 5 to 6 inches on my T5s to the plant itself or to the soil surface. As that plant grows, I continue to stretch out that light distance away from the plant. While still, I continue to raise them, but they're still going to stay within that, say, 6 to 7 inch mark away from the actual leaf itself. So, if your plants are getting leggy, stretchy, you know that your light source isn't strong enough, and you need to change either the source of light, or you need to change the height that light is from your plants. So when we are starting plants, we do have the option out there for heat mats. We can warm up that soil, get that soil up to temp. That will increase germination, make those germination times shorter. But if you're running that with a light at the same time, you can sometimes cook those seedlings. Sometimes that soil will get too hot, get dried out quicker, dry out those germinating seeds. So if you're running a heat mat, I would avoid any kind of light over top of it for most of our vegetable species. There are some seedlings that require a daylight darkness break for that germinations to take place. But I've done fairly well with heat mats when it comes to starting vegetable seeds, peppers, tomatoes. Normally increases my germination time by a couple days. So that is something to think about. You know, we've got a couple pictures up here of some seedlings that are looking really great on those green starts on those lettuces. We've got LED bulbs there on a hydroponic system, it looks like. And those distances are right. We've got great color on our plants. And for the most part, they're doing well. That one in the middle there, we've got some seedlings that are getting really leggy on us. So those first leaves are coming out, and we're not getting enough energy in those plants, so they're continuing to elongate and try to get as close to that light as they possibly can, and that's where we get a lot of leggy seedlings in the spring when people are starting. You know, just think about, you're starting them in one of those styrofoam cups or red solo cups. A lot of times the soil depth is already fairly far down in the cup. That seedling germinates, and then it has to try to find that sunlight somewhere. So it tries to reach up out of that cup and get as close to that energy as possible in order to actually make that energy in the leaf itself. So when they're stretching out like that, they're telling you that they're hungry. So we need to change something up. A lot of times we get a little too carried away on keeping those plants, that soil moist, and we can get what's called dampening off. So when you see those seedlings fall over or break off, that soil moisture has stayed too wet and a fungus has infected that stem tissue there. And so we will have death of that plant. Once again, those plants are just telling us, hey, let's change up our management strategy and do something different here. So let those soils dry out a little bit. It'll actually help that root development. You know, they realize they're getting hungry for water. When they do have water, they're going to put out some more development into that root system to get where they need to make sure they don't run short on water again. So I normally let my seedlings dry out throughout the day before they get watered again. So when we are growing them, a seedling that is not experiencing any kind of environmental issues as far as being pushed around, exposed to the elements, it's not going to grow strong cellular structure. We're going to make weak plants. So that's going to be really brittle tissue. Those are those plants when you take them from inside to outside that the first wind comes through and snaps them right off. So put a fan in front of those seedlings so that we can strengthen up that cellular tissue in those stems and make a much hardier plant for when we go outside. The other thing to remember is that our sunlight or our light intensity inside and underneath those grow lights is going to be different than what we experience or what they experience outside in natural sunlight. So those UV spectrums are going to be different, and we can actually sunburn our plants if we take them from a artificial light straight to a natural sunlight. So we want to make sure that we kind of transition those plants outside, harden those off, put them outside, let them experience some cold weather for a little bit, you know, a couple hours, then bring them back inside, put them out in the shade, let them get a little bit of natural sunlight, then bring them back in. I normally do that for 2 or 3 days before I'll expose them to full sunlight and full temperatures. So when you are transplanting, we want to make sure we follow those recommendations on your seed packet. That seed label, every one of them is going to be a little bit different. This was an old presentation on some tomatoes. With those peppers, we can kind of follow along the same aspects. I believe you're growing carrots this year. We do not want to be transplanting carrots for the most part. That's not going to work out really well for us. So we want to make sure we seed those directly where we plan to harvest them. But when you are transplanting, remember that you can change that depth of rooting on those plants. So if we get really long, leggy tomatoes late in the season, we can go ahead and prune off the majority of those bottom leaves and sink that plant down in the ground as deep as we want to. they will produce what we call adventitious roots. Those hairs on the sides of the stem will change into root structures and just have more rooting area for that plant to take up nutrients, water, and do better throughout the growing season. So when are we going to start these plants? And that most of the time I like to start my seedlings indoors 5 to 6 weeks prior to planting dates. For our cool season plantings like our greens and lettuces, that's going to be May that we're looking at. For the cool seasons, we can also look at an August planting as well. For my portion of West Virginia, most of the time I don't run any of my summer crops, tomatoes, peppers, until late in May, just because we have so many cold nights that we run into. My soil temperature just does not run where it needs to be, and I end up harvesting at the same dates anyhow for my later plantings. Follow those seed spacing guidelines. They're there for a reason, and they will help you in your crop production. We get too tight on some of these spacings, and we're going to end up getting into some bacterial or fungal issues with plant diseases. Sometimes when we do go out there and we plant these early spring, and we've got bare ground and we've got packets full of seeds, it's hard to visualize what this is going to look like at the end. So we sometimes get way too close together on our seed spacing, and most of the time by the end of the season we're going to end up having to prune some of those out of there so that we can have those plants show their full potential. So when things go wrong with our plantings, most of the time when I see it in the office, it is we don't have a soil sample, we purchase poor seed, or a lot of us like to keep overseed, and there's nothing wrong with keeping overseed, but sometimes we get some intermixing on genetics. We also get some carryover on some on some disease through those seeds, and so we want to be cautious of that. Oftentimes we have weak transplants. We've overworked the soil. A lot of people like to see bare soil out there, like to go out there and pick it up with their hands, and you get that flowery feel to it. And honestly, when we go out there and we tear up that ground and we destroy that soil structure, we really destroy the functioning of that soil. It's still there, there's still nutrients, but when it comes to water holding capacity and those roots' ability to grab hold and stay in there, we've really messed those soils up. So be cautious of overworking those soils with that tiller. We can do a lot more damage than good with those implements. A lot of times we make it way too complicated. Everybody wants to find the silver bullet to fix all of our planting problems and have a perfect garden, but a lot of times we just need to kind of sit back and pay attention to what it's telling us, and do a little better of working together with those plants out in the garden. So, like I said, not listening to what they're telling us is a lot of times the big issue. So that's kind of a general overview, a quick bit on getting started, getting those seeds started in the ground. I do have a quick video that we did a couple years ago for Grow This. Let me pull that up and see where it's at. And we can watch that. Has anybody got any questions in the meantime?
Josh, we had a couple comments. I did want to say that we did put the related fact sheet, seed starting fact sheet, in the topics in the chat there if anybody's interested in that, and that has a video embedded. Josh, there were a couple comments about using store purchase mix, and maybe it could be sometimes contaminated. Have you ever had any experience with that, or do you want to comment on it?
It being contaminated from a
Well, sometimes having like mold or fungal growth or possibly being contaminated with herbicides. Do you have any comments on that?
From a herbicide perspective, I do get that question a lot. Um, for the most part, most of those, if it is someone that has been doing composting, most of our residual herbicides that do have residual activity are in the year to 18-month spectrum. Most of those soils are older than that, or most of those mixes are older than that. If there were any contaminations within that, a lot of those bigger companies are doing testing on the side, and any of that should have popped up. So a lot of times the issues that I've had when we've had herbicide incidences uh, hasn't been traced back to the soil itself, but to when we end up having a neighbor that has sprayed and we've had some overspray, or people not realizing the herbicides that they have in other applications that they've used around the house. It obviously is something that, when you're starting seedlings, they're going to be the most susceptible to it. So if it doesn't show up early on with those seedlings, it's probably not something that was there with the soil, but something you picked up later. And so I would say that that's where like that Pro Mix um, is something that that's something that all the nurseries are using, all the big nurseries. And you're not, if there's an issue with that, it's going to be traceable back to the batch of product itself. So that's again one of those things, you get what you pay for. um and when I don't know what particular product they use, but for the most part, I have no concerns about any of them when it comes to herbicide residual. From a fungal portion, I mean, there's funguses and bacteria everywhere. If we give them the right environment and we stress our plants, they're likely to become infected. Um, Obviously, it all depends on what the causative disease was, but those are one of those things where sometimes with the seedlings it's hard to trace back. The dampening off is a very common issue. Doesn't really matter what product you use. If you give them the wrong conditions, there's going to be bacteria come in or fungus come in from some direction. Looking through here, somebody commented on fungus ants or fungus gnats. That's another one that I have seen, especially in moist soils. That one being organic certified. I mean, there is a possibility, depending on how that was treated, that you could have some carry through. For the most part, that wouldn't be something the company would want, and it wouldn't be something that industry would want. But there is always a chance that something like that could happen, especially depending on where it's stored at the stores. I've seen some really poorly handled products at some of the farm supply stores or the um like Lowe's or Walmart. You get busted bags, you get water in those bags. There may have not been contamination to begin with when it came from the manufacturer, but in transit and at location for sale, it's plenty easy enough to pick some of those contaminants up. So let me see if I can share this. It's kind of just a um, quick run through on what we just talked about, but maybe if it'll generate a few more questions, comments, and we'll go from there. Sorry about that. Oh, now we've lost volume. Maybe we got it right now.
I don't think it has volume. I can't hear it.
Does it really not?
Can
Heck
anyone
on.
else hear it?
No.
Okay,
What would cause that?
let me see what happens if I can pull it up.
I'm hearing you.
Okay, 1 second.
Are you able to pull it up?
Keely, do you have the link that you could pull it up on your computer?
I'm looking for it. I don't think it's the same link that you shared in the
No, it's not.
yeah, so I've got to I'm trying to find it. Just 1 second.
Sorry about that, folks.
In the meantime, I could go ahead and put the link to the survey in the chat. Do you have a code word that you'd want them to put in the just to verify they watched it? It can be anything you want.
Tomato starts.
Tomato starts. Okay. Let me put this. So everybody heard the code word is tomato starts. And I just commented the link in the chat to take that if you guys want to work on that while we pull up this video.
Drinking
Do you let's see here. Here we go.
Hey folks, Josh Peplowski.
I could hear that when you. And did I stop? Yeah, I stopped sharing.
Okay, yeah, let me share here. 1 second. Okay. Let me know if you guys can hear this.
It's Josh Peplowski here at WVU Extension Service here in Greenbrier County. We're here this morning to give you a couple of tips and tricks for you all out there participating in the Grow This Garden Challenge. So we've got some plants here that we started about the 1st of April. You guys got your seeds in the mail, I'm sure. You know, some of those tomato varieties, you might get them to germinate in, 3 days. Some of them might be 2 weeks. So just keep that soil moist, keep those seeds from drying out, and they will pop out of the ground. When they come out of the ground, you're going to get 2 leaves come straight out of the ground, and they're going to open up, and we'll start to get some more what you see as normal tomato leaves pop out of the ground there. Some things that as you go along, so if you get the soil too awful wet, your seedlings might just fall over. It's what we call dampening off. So it's a fungus. We want to keep that soil moist, but we don't want to keep it overly wet. All right. Some other things that you can see, these don't all look the best. These guys here are kind of laying down. They're kind of like what we call leggy. So the sunlight, the temperature, everything's just perfect. They grow so fast, they don't have any strength to them. So what we need to do is put a fan on them and change those conditions to where they need to harden up. So we'll get those stems a lot stiffer so that they can be a lot stronger when they go outside. You can see some of these don't have the best color to them, don't have the best light. We're underneath artificial light here. So we need a little bit of liquid fertilizer that goes on these seedlings as we go. There's not a whole lot of nutrients in that soil with that soil medium that you're using. So you got to add some as you go. When you get these plants to, this point here, we're going to take them outside and we're going to do what we call. So we don't want to put these plants directly into the sunlight. They'll sunburn and they'll go into shock. So what we're going to do is put them in the shade, let them get used to the outside temperatures, and kind of as those cooler nights may come, we may bring them inside. But that's what we call hardening off. If you just stick these plants directly outside in the soil, in the sunlight, you're going to kill them. So here in another week or two, we're going to be able to put these plants out in the ground. We will bring you another video, show you how to transplant these and how to stake those tomato plants, so you guys make sure you've got tomatoes on the table this summer. So if you've got other questions or you've got concerns about your plants, send us an email
So,
or Facebook.
one thing to note on there that I didn't speak of earlier is if you are using artificial light, like in that case, you saw some of that purpling on the other side of the leaf. That spectrum of light on those T5 bulbs isn't exactly what those tomatoes want. Some varieties will be a little bit different as well, and so they'll show it off more. But that's that plant's essentially change in pigmentation to block that, kind of like our suntan. So those plants are trying to keep some of that light spectrum out, and so you will see that, especially on what I've experienced with those T5 bulbs. And I don't know what portion of that spectrum that is in that light that's being put off that they don't like, but once you put those out into true sunlight, that will come out of them. So sometimes it's not always a fertility issue, but can be a light source issue. I did see a question in there as far as starting your pepper seeds, waiting and starting your pepper seeds outside. I would highly recommend that you start them inside in a controlled environment, in a starting tray, seed cell. Those plants are really, really tough to direct sow tomato and pepper seeds directly out into the ground and get them to be productive. So I would avoid that. Any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have one of these grow lights that has multiple adjustments for the spectrums. Should I leave it on the full spectrum or change it as the plants begin to grow a little bit more?
I would leave it on the full spectrum. Some of those, I don't know what your other settings are on there, but a lot of those are for like if you're doing indoor plants and you want them to go into flowering, some of our ornamentals, that's where you change up that spectrum to change that light's physiological state, I guess you'd say. Right now, though, our main point is growth and production. So get as much green mass on there so we can get them outside as we can.
Thank you.
Well, and we've had a couple of people say in the comments they're having a little trouble with the survey. We're working on getting that updated, but in the meantime, just select another option if you don't see this week's lesson popping up, and we'll make sure you get your points in the right place. So it's okay to go ahead and select another option. Does anybody else have any other questions for Josh? We really appreciate you coming on here today and giving this great presentation about seeds. It was very informative.
There's no problem. Glad to be on here. Sorry I had the technical difficulty there on the laptop today, but we're definitely getting a little bit of green up here this week, so I believe everybody's excited to get out and start growing.
Absolutely. Yes, the weather's been really nice here in Charleston as well. Well, if anyone didn't have a chance yet to take that survey, you can always message us on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you found us, and I'll send it to you. But we did record this meeting and we'll be putting it out there for folks to take later. So the survey link will be available with that as well. But thank you to Josh and thank you to everyone for coming out today. We really appreciate it. And be sure to tune in next week.